Hello, and welcome to the Deconstructing Project 2025 podcast on Politics Deconstructed. Today, we are continuing our review of Project 2025 to provide listeners with critical information about the very influential mandate for leadership.
This is important because Project 2025 is the conservative playbook for implementing white Christian nationalism throughout the U.S. government and our society. It is a threat to our freedoms, it is a threat to our democratic ideals, and it is a threat to our way of life. I am John, also known online as the Godless Engineer, here with my wife and co-host, KC.
On this episode, we will be continuing our review of Project 2025's Foreword. Today, Promises 1 and 2, which are restoring the family as the centerpiece of American life to protect our children, and dismantling the administrative state to return self-governance to the American people.
I don't think they actually mean self-governance when they say self-governance. Like, this word means something different than what you think it means, kind of situation.
Yeah, it's interesting. They put these buzzwords in the, so if you just read, oh, that seems like a nice promise, having the family is the centerpiece of American life, that's protecting children, those are all great things. Self-governance, American people, like all these words sound good. But when you dig into them and what they're actually saying and what they really want to do, it's actually quite alarming.
Yeah.
And it isn't those things at all.
I agree.
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to start with Promise 1 today.
Okay.
And Promise 1 is restore the family as the centerpiece of American life and protect our children.
Mm-hmm.
And, we've heard recently, J.D. Vance has been very vocal about how important family is to him, in the sense that you have to have children, I guess, to matter, or to have some kind of investment in the future of this country.
Yeah, he did actually say that, actual quote, that if you do not have children, you don't have a physical, connection to the future of our country.
Yeah, and I like what Pete Buttigieg said on The Daily Show about how when he was enlisted and he was doing his tour.
He was deployed.
Yeah, he was deployed when he was taking rocket fire. He didn't have children, but he was still very committed to the future of the country at that point.
And it felt very physical to him.
It was very physical to him.
I'd imagine it was. And there are many, many enlisted people in the military without children. Of course, there are people in the military with children, but there are many enlisted people without children who are well invested. There are many people who do not have children, who are not in the military, who are also invested in the future of the country. You do not have to have children to matter. J.D. Vance has also proposed an interesting, kind of weird thing that every American citizen have the right to vote, including children, and until children are of the appropriate age to vote, which I haven't heard anything that would change that from 18, what it currently is. But presumably prior to 18, he says that the parents would have their children's right to vote. So they get extra votes for however many children they have. I'm interested to know, I would love to ask him some questions about this. Like, so who gets it? The mom who actually had to, do the whole labor thing, or the dad, which we know the answer is probably the dad. So, they've got some, what's the word everybody's using? Weird. They've got some weird ideas going on over there.
Yeah. So let's jump on over to the actual mandate for leadership here. And we're going to start near the beginning of this, but like a lot of this is pretty important to the points that we have to make. So I'm just going to read straight through this first few paragraphs here.
And this is, again, Promise 1, restore the family as the centerpiece of American life and protect our children.
Right.
This is Promise 1. Okay.
In many ways, the entire point of centralizing political power is to subvert the family. Its purpose is to replace people's natural loves and loyalties with unnatural ones. You see this in the popular left-wing aphorism, government is simply the name we give to the things we choose to do together.
I have a difficult time understanding how the government's purpose is to place people's natural loves and loyalties with unnatural ones. I don't
know what they're defining as natural and unnatural. The way that I read it,
natural would be your family. Unnatural would be government or otherwise developed community outside of the family. The family would be natural.
I don't know. I hear a lot about conservatives thinking about like the natural place of the woman is in the kitchen, like at home, taking care of kids instead of being at work. They're very much against like women having careers and putting their careers above family and all this other kind of stuff.
A lot of people are, and people like JD Vance certainly, and in that very conservative Christian crowd definitely are that way. I think unnatural loves and loyalties would be your work community. Like people say my work family, it's not a natural family, it's a created community, right? And so, but I still, despite all of that, natural or unnatural, having a government or a community of whatever sort outside of your family, it doesn't subvert your family.
Right.
You can have both things or multiple things and them all be important to you.
Well, not according to conservatives.
Well, at least not according to this.
Right. All right. To continue. But in real life, most of the things people, quote, do together, end quote, have nothing to do with government. These are the mediating institutions that serve as the building blocks of any healthy society. Marriage, family, work, church, school, volunteering. The name real people give to things we do together is community, not government.
Real people.
Real people, not the fake ones.
But also, to be fair, they say this is like some sort of left-wing saying government is simply the name we give to the things we choose to do together. Reading this book is literally the first time I've ever seen that. I've never seen that, ever. Now, that doesn't mean it isn't a thing, but we're pretty into politics.
Yeah.
And I've never heard that.
I don't
know where they're getting that.
I don't understand where they're getting it either, but apparently that's how they're...
It's probably some silly shit said in the 1950s.
Maybe. Continuing, our lives are full of interwoven, overlapping communities, and our individual and collective happiness depends upon them. But the most important community in each of our lives, and the life of the nation, is the family. Today, the American family is in crisis. 40% of all children are born to unmarried mothers, including more than 70% of black children. There is no government program that can replace the hole in a child's soul cut out by the absence of a father. Fatherlessness is one of the principal sources of American poverty, crime, mental illness, teen suicide, substance abuse, rejection of the church, and high school dropouts.
There are also a lot of other sources for those things that conservative Christians tend to do to others that cause those things.
Well, yeah, and people need to recall that conservatives are the primary reason why a lot of black families grow up or exist without father figures in them because of how they've instituted many of the crime policies and a lot of the different laws surrounding like drug possessions and all that kind of stuff. Like there's just been a lot of instrumental laws that have been passed throughout history that have specifically been targeted to the black community.
Oh no, you're talking about systemic racism.
Oh, am I talking about how like racism has affected like everyday American life throughout history and how conservatives are directly responsible for it? Oh no. So many of the problems government programs are designed to solve, but can't, are ultimately problems created by the crisis of marriage and the family. The world has never seen a thriving, healthy, free, and prosperous society where most children grow up without their married parents. If current trends continue, we are heading towards social implosion.
There have also been many societies in which there are thriving, healthy, free people who are very successful who grow up without married parents.
Just speaking as somebody from a broken home, it's not just the broken home that produces bad seeds or whatever.
Sure. I mean, you can have parents who are split, who co-parent very well, and that's even a healthier situation than having the parents in the same home where they have a very toxic environment. You know what I'm saying? So it would be better for the kid to have, if the parents are toxic together, separate and then have healthier lives individually that's healthier for the kid, actually. So, I mean, I understand what they're trying to say, but also family is what you make it. Because blood family can even a married family, mom, dad, stay together, go to church, all of that, right? Can be horrendous for children growing up in those environments, depending on what the environment is like.
Right.
And so there are a lot of people who have what I call family, right? You have a friend group that's family. If you don't have a really strong family environment, you can make your own family. And that can be your source of happiness and love and all the things that you need from a family. You don't have to necessarily get from your quote unquote natural family.
Right. Exactly. But hey, you know what?
What?
They have a solution.
Oh, they do. Perfect. Let's hear it.
All right. So the solution is federal power must instead be wielded to reverse the crisis and rescue America's kids from familial breakdown. The conservative promise includes dozens of specific policies to accomplish this existential task.
But I thought they wanted smaller government and government to stay out of people's lives.
Oh, but only on the things that they don't want the government to be involved in, like regulations and stuff that protect the American people.
Yeah, one of the things I know that they're going after is no-fault divorce. They want to ban no-fault divorce so that people can't get divorced if they want to.
Right.
If they don't have like a reason like infidelity or abuse or something like that, if they don't have some kind of reason like that, they essentially have to stay in miserable marriages.
But here's something outside of the mandate here. JD Vance thinks that women who are in abusive marriages should not get out of abusive marriages.
He does. He has said that.
So I just wonder.
So
right.
It's like, yeah, it's on video.
I wonder how the melding of these two, like, obviously conservative positions, like Project 2025 here, who wants to get rid of no-fault divorce, and then JD Vance, who thinks that, you should just not be able to get divorced at all, it seems. It's rather kind of weird.
Yeah, and I guess I don't understand how JD Vance or anybody like him who thinks that abusive marriages should stay together. I would like to know why they think that's a healthy environment for a child to grow up in. That seems very unhealthy.
It does.
It seems like a child will see a very unhealthy and toxic relationship. They will observe abusive behavior. Those things impact a child, and they shouldn't be around those things.
Right.
So because then they don't grow up seeing or learning how to have healthy, successful relationships.
I agree. All right, so they do list off some things that they could do to help enhance reverse the crisis.
Reverse the crisis.
Okay. Some are obvious and long-standing goals, like eliminating marriage penalties in federal welfare programs and the tax code, and installing work requirements for food stamps. But we must go further. It's time for policymakers to elevate family authority, formation, and cohesion as their top priority, and even use government power, including through the tax code, to restore the American family. Yeah, so, I mean, it kind of seems to me like they're seeking to, like, somehow use the government to get into the personal lives of American citizens in order to emphasize the need for family.
Some of these things is a little difficult for me to understand. Installing work requirements for food stamps. Traditionally, Republicans tend to believe that the reason that people are on food stamps or other kind of government assistance programs are because of bad decisions they're making, right? They make bad decisions, or they're lazy, right? They don't want to work. And so they think that, or they're on drugs, things like that. But when laws have been enacted or regulations have been enacted to drug test or to install work requirements or to do things like this, it has fully been demonstrated that that's not the case. It's not the case that people are on government assistance because they are on drugs. They're spending money on drugs. If you have money for drugs, you have money for food, right? That's kind of their thing. But when they install these barriers, all it does is cost the government more money, and it doesn't save. Right. Because the very vast majority. I think in one state, I think it was maybe Tennessee, they did the drug test requirement. They caught 30 people.
Yeah.
Out of all the people in the whole state.
It was very minuscule.
It's ridiculous. And they spent hundreds of thousands of dollars doing this and saved less than 30,000. It was ridiculous. It was stupid. It made no sense. People are not on government assistance programs because they're lazy and don't want to work. They're just not. I do want to hit this next point. I'm not sure if, John, if you were going to talk about this, but it says that the next paragraph says, today the left is threatening the tax-exempt status of churches and charities that reject woke progressivism. I don't think any church should have tax-exempt status, whether they're progressive or not. I think churches should pay taxes.
Yeah, no, I totally agree.
And I think charities should have to demonstrate that they are using the money that they take in to fund the charitable cause. And if they cannot demonstrate that, then they should have to pay taxes too.
I totally agree with that, yeah.
Because there are so many charities and churches, mind you, that pay their leadership insane amounts of money, ridiculous amounts of money that they could be paid a reasonable amount and then the rest of it go into the charity or the church or whatever. So there's a lot of abuses there. So I think it's interesting where they're worried about government assistance for food, right? And abuses for that. But they seem to have no concern with government assistance for churches and charities. They have no concern that there's any kind of abuse there. And we know for sure there are abuses there. It's hypocritical, obviously.
But I'm glad that you filled the time with that, because I was looking up something, because again, I have to question every time they make some kind of claim.
Okay.
So installing work requirements for food stamps.
Uh-huh.
Well, so food stamps is kind of an antiquated term. Right now it's known as SNAP.
SNAP, yeah.
Right. And there are general work requirements in order to be in the SNAP program already. So I'm just reading directly from the Food and Nutrition Service, which is a part of the USDA, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, right? Mm-hmm. So it says the general work requirements. If you are age 16 to 59 and able to work, you will probably need to meet the general work requirements to get SNAP benefits. The general work requirements include registering for work, participating in the SNAP employment and training or work fair if assigned by your state SNAP agency, taking a suitable job if offered, and not voluntarily quitting a job or reducing your work hours below 30 hours a week without a good reason. There are instances where you can get excused from the general work requirements. Mm-hmm. If you're any one of these things, one, already working at least 30 hours a week or earning wages at least equal to the federal minimum wage multiplied by 30 hours, meeting work requirements for another program, taking care of a child under 6 or an incapacitated person, unable to work due to a physical or mental limitation, participating regularly in an alcohol or drug treatment program, studying in school or a training program at least half time, but college students are subject to other eligibility rules. What I'm hearing, right, considering what the rules already are, and what they're saying in Project 2025 is that they want to further, I guess, impose more work requirements. And I'm just speculating here, but maybe get rid of the work exemptions. Even if you have a child under 6, then you would still need to put in 30 hours a week kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the things you see with work requirements is the necessity for all of those exceptions, which kind of, to me, makes the work requirements a little silly. But I don't have an issue with people working and getting government assistance, obviously. I think the point of government assistance is to, at least in the US, is to help people, give people a hand up until they don't need it anymore, right? So you're not creating it, because I know there's a lot of conservatives that will say that government assistance programs essentially make it to where nobody wants to work. They just want to live because they don't need to. There's no incentive to work if you're just getting everything paid for. But I don't think that's necessarily true.
Well, no, I think that it's patently not true, because only in the exemptive cases do you see somebody that is getting SNAP benefits and not actually working at the same time? These are situations where you are working like 30 hours a week or so, but you're still under like the poverty line. And so you need that, what we were talking about before, that equity. You know, you need that little bit of extra ladder rung in order to actually survive. And so like, Republicans, it seems, at least conservatives, I will say, conservatives in the Project 2025, seems like they want to cut that out from the lower class.
There's a lot of things they want to cut out, and not just in Project 2025, but more mainstream in the Republican space is free school lunches for kids. The fact that it always blows my mind whenever I hear about school lunch debt. Like it just, I cannot wrap my brain around school lunch debt. Makes no sense to me. Feed the kids. Feed the kids. Why is this a problem? Why is this feed the kids?
Well, yeah, and that's one thing. That's one thing they've actually proposed. I believe it's in Project 2025, but I mean, conservatives have always been going after it, and that's the free lunch program. They under Trump, they restricted it to where less children were able to qualify for it, and in their future plans now, they want to further restrict it so even less kids are given like a free lunch or have access to that program. Which a lot of times these kids only get to have lunch. The food, not lunch, but food one time a day, and that's at school. I personally know people who grew up and that at school is the only time they got food. And so when school started doing breakfast programs, I thought that was awesome. Like that, when I was a kid, most schools did not have breakfast programs until later. But the breakfast program or summer lunches programs, I think those are amazing. And I think those are necessary. And I don't understand, no matter the reason for a child's parents' financial distress to where they need government assistance, no matter the reason for it, whether it be drugs or just a low paying job because they didn't have access to education or whatever the reason, why is that the kids' fault? Feed the kids. Like, I don't know why anybody is fighting about feeding children. And they want to protect kids, but they don't want to feed them and they don't want to give them health care. Well, no, because they want to use the kids in order to shame the parents for not making money or not having a job or being incapacitated, unable to work, and not being able to feed the kids. So, that was one thing that I learned when I got into the career that I'm in now, is this whole idea of passing responsibility off. Basically, they're wanting to pass the responsibility off onto the parents and blame the parents for not feeding the children when the parents are unable to provide that because of whatever circumstance they're in.
Yeah, and it shouldn't even matter. It should not matter what the circumstances are or why. It has just always eluded me why we fight about feeding the kids. Why are we doing this? Anyway.
Are you ready to move on to the next area that they're going to improve for American life?
Oh, yeah, I can't wait.
Next, they're going to delete scary words.
What?
Yep. All right, so the next, we're going back to the mandate here. The next conservative president must make the institutions of American civil society hard targets for woke culture warriors. This starts with deleting the terms sexual orientation and gender identity, or what they're putting in quotes here, SOGI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, gender, gender equality, gender equity, gender awareness, gender sensitive, abortion, reproductive health, reproductive rights, and any other term used to deprive Americans of their First Amendment rights out of every federal rule, agency, regulation, contract, grant, regulation, and piece of legislation that exists.
Do they think that somehow by eliminating words that offend them, which some of these words offending them is very bizarre, but do they think that somehow by eliminating these words, they eliminate those people who are described by them?
I don't know, but I don't know how any of this, how considering any of these things would deprive Americans of their First Amendment rights.
It wouldn't.
I don't understand, because nobody's being arrested for throwing derogatory slurs at a marginalized group. Nobody's throwing you in jail for that. Social media companies do through their terms of service not allow you to use certain kinds of phrases and words because that's targeting a marginalized group. Like that's part of their terms of service. That you would think that they would want to champion a business running the business how the business wants to without government.
Like, no, they don't want to do that. They want to target businesses, and we'll see this. We'll see this as we continue through Project 2025, that they are not interested in letting businesses or people live their lives in ways that make them happy. They target anything that is not like them.
And I feel like this sets up, which they're not specifically saying this here, but just reading the very colloquial use of words here, I could totally see them trying to allude to like passing an amendment to get rid of the Civil Rights Act of 65.
Yeah, I'm not sure. They haven't discussed anything about that, so I'm not sure that we should go there. But I mean, they literally want to take all of these words out of every single regulation, rule, contract, which means you're pulling in the private sector, which we'll see more as we move forward, what they want to do in relation to that. Every single thing, they just want to eliminate these words entirely, as if that solves a problem that actually creates a lot more problems. It's absurd.
You ready for the next area that they're going to improve for American lives?
Sure, yeah.
Pornography.
Oh, they're going to do a bunch of porn?
No.
Oh.
They're getting rid of it. So going back to the mandate, pornography manifested today in the omnipresent propagation of transgender ideology and sexualization of children, for instance, is not a political Gordian knot inextricably binding up disparate claims about free speech, property rights, sexual liberation, and child welfare.
So let's just pause for a second. Anything related to pornography and children is illegal.
Right.
Okay, so they're wrapping it all together. There's pornography, and then there's illegal shit that happens with kids that is already illegal, and everyone agrees should remain illegal. Okay, so let's make sure we separate those things.
Right, but they are portraying any kind of transgender literature or any kind of sex ed sort of material as being pornography. Because for some reason, conservatives, whenever they hear about gay or transgender people, they can only think of sex, what it means to be, I guess, gay or transgender, because for them transgender is a sex thing, it seems.
Yeah, which is really strange because it's literally not. Like it has nothing to do with sexuality. It has to do with gender identity, even though being gay or being bi is a sexuality. That's also not inherently sexual any more so than just being straight.
Right.
Like a straight person is not inherently sexual because they're straight. So therefore, a gay person is not inherently sexual just because they're gay. It's ridiculous.
I agree. But as we all saw with the RNC, there's plenty of Republicans out there that probably want to distance themselves from the closet. I'm just saying, Grindr broke down for a little bit.
Yeah, because of overuse in a particular area.
Yep.
Maybe somewhere around where the RNC was, but you know, you can look that up yourself.
To continue with Project 2025 here, it has no claim to First Amendment protection.
Yes, it does.
Yeah, that's been through the courts multiple times.
Many times.
Its purveyors are child predators and misogynistic exploiters of women.
No, they're not.
Their product is as addictive as any illicit drug and as psychologically destructive as any crime.
Citation needed.
Pornography should be outlawed.
Go f*** yourself.
The people who produce and distribute it should be imprisoned.
For breaking what laws?
None, as far as I can tell. Other than, they just feel like porn is bad. You have to do it on the down low.
There's no laws. Of course, I guess they're saying it should be outlawed. And so when it's outlawed, the people who do it should be imprisoned.
Yep.
But, you can't go backwards. So it's legal now. Anybody who does it now, again, children or any laws that they are breaking aside, producing porn is not illegal.
I think that we need to continuously recenter ourselves to what they're actually talking about here. And they're not just talking about actual pornography. They're also talking about like transgender books that include transgender individuals. There
was a book that was banned from a library in, I'm just going to say Florida because that's probably where it was, because Florida, right? That was banned from a school library because the author's last name is gay.
Right.
That's, to them, that's pornographic.
Right.
It's madness. It's just utter madness. You're right.
Well,
I keep forgetting this isn't about just actual pornography.
right.
This is about a lot more. Anything that has any content with a sexual nature,
Or not even sexual in nature, like just the fact that I know there was one book that was banned just for the fact that it had gay dads in it. And I think they were anthropomorphized like animals that were gay dads, even so I mean, like anything that has to do with a I guess typical, I guess you could say, like from their point of view, non-typical relationship is going to be pornography. They're going to label it as pornography because they can't think of anything else but like gay sex when they think about a gay individual.
I'm sorry, that seems like a them thing.
It's definitely a them thing.
I don't get the right's obsession with genitalia and sex stuff. It's weird and I don't understand it.
Yeah. This whole pornography thing would also include sex education materials.
Well, right. And I guess I have a difficult time understanding the opposition to sex education. And I get that things need to be, including what's in libraries, right? Including that, age appropriate.
Yeah.
Like some things that are appropriate for a teenager are not going to be appropriate for a 6-year-old. And I think all reasonable adults understand that and agree with that. So it's not like someone is suggesting that we take a content that is, appropriate for a 17-year-old and provide it to an elementary school child, but just banning things completely outright to include sex education books because, oh my God, there's a picture of a penis, like not a picture, but like they're not even pictures. They're like depictions, right? Drawings or whatever of the reproductive organs. That's a health and medical thing. That's a health class thing. Calm down. It's fine. We don't have pictures of Ron Jeremy's Wang up in kids' school books.
All right. Let's see. Let's continue. Educators and public librarians who purvey it should be classed as registered sex offenders. I mean, I feel like that's totally ridiculous, especially considering that we're not actually talking about Playboys in the public library. Even if I don't know, I haven't been to a public library in a while, but even if there are Playboys in the public library, I would think that they would be like controlled. But I seriously doubt that they would have a Playboy in a public library. But no. In any case, they're not talking about Playboys. They're just talking about any kind of book that has anything to do with gender or sexuality in general, even if it's not explicit.
Or even characters that are not straight.
Right.
Without any sexual content.
Right.
Yeah.
And telecommunications and technology firms that facilitate its spread should be shuttered. So now they want to impose, dictate special rules on businesses, further increasing the tentacles of the government into American life.
So but they're the small government people.
Well, I mean, they're small in the areas where they can profit from it. But if they can't profit from it, then they want to be all up in that. All right. Next, the next little topic area that we have is universal school choice. All right. In our schools, the question of parental authority over their children's education is a simple one. Schools serve parents, not the other way around. That is, of course, the best argument for universal school choice, a goal all conservatives and conservative presidents must pursue. But even before we achieve that long-term goal, parents' rights as their children's primary educators should be non-negotiable in American schools. States, cities, and counties, school boards, union bosses, principals, and teachers who disagree should be immediately cut off from federal funds.
So this is my problem with the idea that, hold on, let me make sure I have the right words. Parents' rights as their children's primary educators should be non-negotiable in American schools. Okay. However, right, and just stay with me for a moment. Parents have different ideas of what they want their kids to learn and be taught, right? So in public schools, what are teachers to do? Because that's the thing, they want to dictate what's taught in public schools. If you can't deal with your kid having a general education that is secular and well-rounded you can't deal with that, send your kid to a private school or homeschool them. You do have that choice. What you cannot do is dictate for everyone else's children. And imagine what kind of nightmare that would be for a school system.
Right.
Because like we have very different ideas of what is appropriate for public schools than say a conservative Christian person that would go to our son's school. Right. And so they would want certain things taught with a conservative Christian bent. And we don't want that. And so you've got this battle. Never mind, that's just two sides of it, right? There's so much more. You cannot do this with public schools.
Considering right now, parents have the option to homeschool their children, like where they're at. A lot of times there are options for sending your child to a private school. I know that probably most, especially conservative parents, can't afford private school, but that's why they keep trying to force those voucher programs in so that they can get the government to pay for it. But all of this is to say that there's nothing preventing you from like having your child taught the specific things, like even for conservatives, the weird things that you want to teach your child. But what they're wanting to do is to force everybody to abide by what the conservative parents want their children to be taught. That's why I feel like that is why they're trying to force this on public schools instead of just maintaining what's already available, and that's the private charter schools or the homeschooling.
Well, and what's interesting is the way that they use universal school choice, because I can see some people, coming back at us over what we're talking about. Universal school choice typically does not mean what is taught in an individual school. It means that parents can choose to send their kids to a different public school than the one in their local area if they so choose, because it's a better school. So that's typically what universal school choice is, right? But the issue is public schools should be teaching a fairly standard set of information, and especially within a state, right? Because states set those regulations. I mean, there are federal regulations for things, but generally states decide what textbooks to use and all those kinds of things. Those are state decisions, which, to be fair, maybe they should not be, given that in Texas, they have a history textbook that says that Moses is the founding father of the United States. That aside, we're talking about this in relation to how they've written about it here. So they're talking about it, universal school choice, differently than how it's normally discussed. They're basically saying parents should be allowed to decide what is taught in schools. And if there are teachers or anybody who disagrees, schools that disagree with that, then they should be cut off from federal funding.
Right.
Yeah. So it's really different. They go into, I think you're going to get into what things should definitely not be in public schools.
Yeah. All right. So to continue with the very specific things that are going to get federal funding taken away from public schools, the noxious tenets of, quote, critical race theory, end quote, and quote, gender ideology, unquote, should be excised from curricula in every public school in the country. These theories poison our children, who are being taught on the one hand to affirm that the color of their skin fundamentally determines their identity and even their moral status, while on the other hand they are taught to deny the very creatureliness that inheres in being human and consists in accepting the givenness of our nature as women, men or women. That was a very awkward sentence for me to read. Like, these are creatureliness.
Creatureliness. So here's the thing. They cannot even, one, define what critical race theory actually is, and they have no clue what gender ideology is, because they have some idea that gender has something to do with sex. Okay, so
no, genitals has to do with genitals. It
has to do solely with genitals. Or like your chromosomes, right? It has to do with that. But like, nobody's ever tested their chromosomes. Like, anyway, the fact that they can't even actually define these things, and most of them can't. When they're asked, you see interviews and they're asked to define things, they absolutely can't, and then they go into meltdown mode, right? And insult mode. Critical race theory is not taught in public schools, like K through 12.
Right.
Critical race theory is not taught there. Critical race theory is something that is in collegiate level elective type of things. Like, critical race theory isn't even something that is taught in a gen ed course
right.
set of classes in college. Like, it's very specific.
Yeah, and even in the collegiate courses, it's not about placing the blame for past wrongdoings on a current generation of any particular race of individuals. It's about acknowledging the role that race has played in like American history.
Right. It's not about any individual and their skin color and whether you should feel good or bad about that. It is not about the moral status that you have based on your skin color. That's what I'm saying is they can't even define this. Like, it's not about these things. So yeah, that's a very weird segment for me as well.
Right. And I feel like this is the very subversive way in which they are whitewashing history. Mm-hmm. Because as we've seen with a lot of different states and a lot of different like congressmen and women trying to whitewash history and basically saying, well, you can't teach that white people were the ones that instituted slavery. And you must teach that, like, for instance, in the great state of Florida, slavery was a good thing.
Oh yeah, they were so lucky because they got to come here,
and they were given essential work training or whatever. Like, they were given essential skills by being slaves.
Sure, right.
Yeah, they're not going to talk about how when slavery was abolished, they just sort of left the black community with nothing. That's where a lot of the like very racist ideas about like the attitudes of people in the black community like are like being lazy or not being on time and all this other stuff. Like, a lot of those racist ideas, they sprung up from
tropes.
Tropes. Yes,
Mm-hmm.
tropes that sprung up from that abandonment of the black community. Like, they don't want to teach what actually happened to the black community
Mm-hmm.
and like how all of the current problems in our society now trace back to then.
Well, and they also don't want to teach what happened, what happened to, I'm not even going to say this passively, what white people did to black people who did succeed. They don't want to teach that because that is shameful, right? They don't want to teach that black people couldn't get mortgages at banks, so they couldn't get homes. They could not build generational wealth in the same way that white people could. These are things that are historically true. It's not taught as a means to make white people feel bad about themselves. It's taught because it's an important part of our history. And I don't understand why any parent would not want their kid to know history. Again, at an age-appropriate time. You're obviously not going to teach a 6-year-old about lynching, right? You're not going to show them pictures of that because that would be horrifying. But there are certainly ways that you can teach children at age-appropriate levels about our history. We do it with white history. There's no reason why we can't do it with black history as if it's a different, you know what I mean? Like, I guess with our country's history, we can do that. And it's fine. It's fine to say that some of our presidents in the past owned slaves. It's fine to say that Jefferson raped some of his slaves and had black children with the women that he raped, because it's true. I understand people like to heroicize our founding fathers and all of that, but they were flawed individuals. Our society was flawed. It's fine to say these things. It's fine.
Yeah. All right. To continue with the mandate here.
Okay.
Allowing parents or physicians to reassign the sex of a minor is child abuse and must end. For public institutions to use taxpayer dollars to declare the superiority or inferiority of certain races, sexes, and religions is a violation of the Constitution and civil rights law and cannot be tolerated by any government anywhere in the country.
Okay. So parents and physicians are not reassigning the sex of any children.
No.
And they are not reassigning the gender of any child. If a child feels that their body doesn't fit who they feel like they are, who they think they are, there is a lot of specialized care for that, to include therapy and other things. Not to say that they need to not feel that way, but to figure out, for children especially, I hate to word the use legitimacy, but if they're truly transgender, or if they're just confused, or if they're just trying to figure themselves out, there's a lot of they want to try out different expressions. And so that's why we do not do permanent surgical changes on children. That doesn't happen. That just doesn't happen. There are very few instances where that has ever happened. It is not a real problem. It is a made up problem.
Right. Because conservatives, in their minds, they're thinking, oh, these liberals are forcing their children to be a different sex or different gender.
That's just not the case. Parents accepting their children's expressions of who they are and allowing them to do so is actually incredibly healthy for them. It gives them the opportunity to express themselves in however they're feeling, and they may end up that it may end up that they are transgender. It may end up that they're not. There are people who they try different things out as they're not growing up, but older teens, young adults, whatever. They try out different things in relation to their sexuality because they're trying to figure themselves out and what they're into, who they are, what they like. And so just because a person may have a same-sex sexual encounter doesn't necessarily mean that they are gay, right? But it could not. So these are complicated issues. They're not meant for this black and white. It's completely wrong ever to allow a child to consider their expression of themselves.
Honey, this is the group that thinks that making homophobic jokes about their children to their children's face prevents them from being gay.
Yeah, no, that doesn't work either. Especially if your kid's gay. All that really does is traumatize them. It's really not good.
All right, so to continue, but the pro-family promises expressed in this book and central to the next conservative president's agenda must go much further than the traditional narrow definition of family issues. Every threat to family stability must be confronted. Every threat.
Yeah, without listing what they are. Perfect. I think we're going to get some examples, though, yeah?
Yes. And so we're heading into some more examples of how they're going to help preserve the family, I guess.
Okay.
So continuing on to the next page, we have, finally, conservatives should gratefully celebrate the greatest pro-family win in a generation, the overturning of Roe v. Wade, a decision that for 5 decades made a mockery of our Constitution and facilitated the deaths of tens of millions of unborn children. But the Dobbs decision is just the beginning. Conservatives in the states and in Washington, including the next conservative administration, should push as hard as possible to protect the unborn in every jurisdiction in America.
I think this is critical because while former President Trump has come out and said that he does not support a national abortion ban, J.D. Vance, he removed from his website that he is 100% against abortion 100% of the time, and he does believe in a federal abortion ban. That was removed from his website probably because it conflicted with Trump's what Trump was saying and caused problems for them, right? Because abortion is a huge issue. In 100% of the states that have had abortion on the ballot, 100% of the time, abortion has been affirmed, right? Red states, blue states, everywhere, everyone, generally speaking, believes that the right to abortion should be upheld. And it's 100%, okay? So it's never lost. Now, that doesn't mean that everyone, obviously, there are certainly lots of people who are opposed to abortion. There are people who are opposed to it completely, like J.D. Vance. But despite the fact that Trump says that he is not for a federal abortion ban, he has taken a lot of credit for getting Roe v. Wade overturned. And he's not talking a lot about it now. But considering how much of the mandate for leadership that Trump's administration took up the last time he was president, in the first year, 2017, you have to consider that this is something that they will go after. Push as hard as possible to protect the unborn in every jurisdiction in America. That does not mean leave it up to the states. That means we are coming after your rights everywhere. And they will. They will. Given the opportunity, they will. And they've proven that.
They definitely have. This is speculation on my part, but I feel like a lot of the conservative rhetoric right now surrounding like Trump and like getting Trump elected we've seen this many times before of them saying what people want to hear, but then once they get into office, once they get into power, they totally flip-flop on it, and they go ahead and enact the most extreme version of whatever they were trying to wrap in a bow tie.
That's what most of the Supreme Court justices that Trump put in said. They said this is settled law. Right. They said that. They're on video. In committees. They're on record. This is settled law.
I feel like there's enough instances to definitely say that conservatives lie, especially about these particular issues. Like, in any other mundane issue, I wouldn't say conservatives lie, but on these very important issues, conservatives lie.
Well, because they're I was going to say, because they're losers, not the people. These topics are losers for them. Right. People support the right to abortion. They do not. So they say what they need to get elected. If they need to come off of the promises, or they need to step back from the extremism a little bit to get elected, they will. But that does not mean that they still don't intend to do those things when they get there. You give them the power, you give them the opportunity, they're going to take it.
All right, continuing with the mandate here, because we're still in Promise 1.
Sorry.
In particular, the next conservative president should work with Congress to enact the most robust protections for the unborn that Congress will support, while deploying existing federal powers to protect innocent life and vigorously comply with statutory bans on the federal funding of abortion. Currently, right now, it's against the law to fund abortion or for federal funds to be used for abortion services. Right. So that's not anything that they need to instantiate, but they think that federal funds are being used for
They
it.
say that all the time, despite the fact that it's not true. They don't really care about truth. Anyway.
Also, another instance of them wanting to insert the government into private life yet again. Yeah. Conservatives should ardently pursue these pro-life and pro-family policies while recognizing the many women who find themselves in immensely difficult and often tragic situations and the heroism of every choice to become a mother. Alternative options to abortion, especially adoption, should receive federal and state support.
I do find this interesting because when you try to adopt a child in some states, I don't know how it is in all states, in some states, the only way you can adopt a child is through adoption agencies that are generally run by religiously based institutions. Given that, and adoptions can be handled by the state too, right? Let's start. The private institutions that handle this will not allow, in Alabama, I know this 100% for sure, because John and I ran into this when we were looking into adoption. They will not allow non-Christians who are not actively participating in their parish, in their congregations, to adopt children. So they will not allow adoptions for non-active Christians.
Oh, and if you're wondering how are they going to know, like as if you could just lie,
they contact your church.
They'll either contact your church or you have to provide a signed letter from your church's pastor. And it has to be an established church. So like I'm what's that universal Unitarianism, that online whatever for being able to marry somebody. Like I can't, as that kind of person, sign something being like, we're part of a church, we meet every Sunday for some kind of Congress.
Well, and it has to be, for those Christian organizations, it has to be Christian, right? It can't be any other but Christian. For the state, they don't necessarily discriminate based on your religion per se. However, if the birth mother says that they want their child to go to a Christian home, which apparently like 90% of them do here in Alabama, I can only talk about here in Alabama, they will not adopt out to a non-Christian home.
Which I think is kind of really weird here.
If you give up your parental rights, you don't have a right to say. That's just my opinion.
There's a real problem in the adoption, like, I guess, industry, if you will, of Christians adopting a lot of children, like, out of it. And a lot of these Christian households end up having, like, issues, like, the issues with taking care of the children, like being abusive towards the children and all that kind of stuff. Like, there are a lot of problems that they think that by requiring them to be Christian,
they're inherently good.
Right.
They'll be inherently good parents. They're inherently good people. And that's not the case.
Right. And so I'm not saying that of every single parent that adopts a child, but a lot of them.
Well, and there are plenty of good, financially stable, generally stable people who would like to adopt a child who are not Christian, who can't. So I don't see that getting any better under this kind of regime here. But additionally, they talk about alternative options to abortion. So one of the alternative options to abortion that they definitely don't list is contraception. They want to restrict access to contraception too.
Yeah.
So it's like this, it's this hellscape for reproductive choices. You don't have reproductive choices in this world.
And they're not just looking to ban like birth control pills, but they're also wanting to ban like condoms. Like I've heard, I'm not saying that this is a mainstream conservative position, but there are a segment of conservatives out there that are looking to ban condoms. And so like, it's just the whole gambit of contraception that they want to get rid of, essentially.
Well, I mean, and if you go back to earlier on in this promise, they want to, when you're talking about these things, they want to completely eliminate the words reproductive health, reproductive rights from all federal rules, agency regulations, contracts, grants, regulations, and any piece of legislation that exists. So these other options, how are we even going to talk about them? You're not, because there's literally they don't want you to have options. You don't have options.
No. Well, that was promise one, which is a hellscape, like we said.
Hold on. I have to, because this is hilarious because of who they're running. The last sentence of that promise is, in summary, the next president has a moral responsibility to lead the nation in restoring a culture of life in America again, which I think is absolutely hilarious. I wonder how many abortions Donald Trump has paid for.
I don't know, but I mean, the man has had, 3 wives that he cheated on, every single wife with the one that he married next.
Yeah. And he's cheated on this one.
And paid off a porn star. He's gotten 34 felonies for that.
I feel like the guy that they're running to lead this moral revolution is maybe not the best.
Considering that a lot of what's in like the Heritage Foundation, everything like that had its beginnings in the moral majority. That makes it even more hilarious to me.
I do not understand. But anyway, let's move on to promise number 2.
All right. Promise number 2 is to dismantle the administrative state and return self-governance to the American people, which, I mean, let me read this first part here that we kind of focus in on. Conservatives desire a smaller government, not for its own sake, but for the sake of human flourishing. All I have to say is, what? Like, promise number 1 was about how they are going to insert the government into like the very smallest facets of American life, like the most private parts of American life. They want to insert the government and control all of that. Yeah. But they want small government.
That's why it blows my mind, because they say these things. They say these, dismantle the administrative state. Okay, but then you want to control, like you want to say I can't have birth control, so you want to take away my right to have a conversation with my doctor and my family planning choices. You want to make sure that I can't teach my kids what I want to teach them, or you want to teach your kids what you want to teach them, so then I don't have a choice but to take my kid out of school because you guys are forcing your way on other people. Like, it's crazy. It's just crazy. They say these things, but then they say the complete opposite thing when they describe what they want to do. And I think they count on people reading the highlight and not what's under it. And that's what you need to read. Fine print, baby. The fine print.
I think the next sentence here in the promise is particularly funny too. But the Washington establishment doesn't want a constitutionally limited government because it means they lose power and are held more accountable by the people who put them in power.
You should be held accountable by the people who put you in power.
Yeah. Like, I mean, we elect our representatives to the government. So, I mean, they should be representing us. If they're not,
don't, though. That's not how it works anymore.
It's not how it works anymore. But
they act like that's a Democrat problem. Like that's something. Come on, we have Tommy Tuberville. I don't want to hear anything from anybody about problems with your elected officials.
Well, I mean, when they talk about constitutionally limiting government, I mean, you have to consider what they've already mentioned that they want to restrict. You know, from or I guess not restrict the states from doing. Like they They have been on this crusade against like the Civil Rights Act since Civil Rights Act got passed. They essentially want to roll back a lot of the protections that the government gives minorities, and also protections based on sex and gender. Like they want to roll all of these things back so that, you know, we can go back to a time when minorities and others were directly targeted, and they were not protected by the government in any kind of way, so that
they don't see those protections generally as necessary. They see them as advantages, but they're literally not that. So
to continue on promise number 2, in this next section on the next page of this, it says, in the end, congressional leaders' behavior and incentives here are no different from those of global elites insulating policy decisions over the climate, trade, public health, and you name it. From the sovereignty of national electorates, public scrutiny and democratic accountability make life harder for policymakers, so they skirt it. It's not dysfunction, it's corruption.
I'm always so amused when they talk about climate and public health types of decisions and how it's corruption. It's just bizarre to me, but anyway.
So are you, I'm wondering if y'all are curious about what the administrative state is or what that means when they say it.
Yeah, it's actually shown up several times. I mean, we're only to page technically 7 in the book, I guess. There were many pages before it, right, that were the Roman numerals instead of actual numbers. And so they have said it a lot and have yet not defined it. So maybe are we ready to define it now?
They're about to define it. All right. So it says that the term administrative state refers to the policymaking work done by the bureaucracies of all the federal government's departments, agencies, and millions of employees.
Okay.
Under Article 1 of the Constitution, quote, all legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in a Congress of the United States, which shall consist of a Senate and a House of Representatives. That is, federal law is enacted only by elected legislators in both houses of Congress.
Okay, so their solution to the administrative state, which if they're talking about policy work done by the bureaucracies of all the federal government's departments, agencies, and millions of employees, that's typically, I think they're referring to executive, everything that's under the executive. Mm-hmm. Their problem is that it's not done by Congress, so they want to dismantle it without any plan for how the work that those agencies do is going to be done afterward, aside from give it back to Congress, because Congress has been so effective.
Right.
Like, I mean, we don't even have to talk about a Republican Congress versus a Democrat Congress, who controls what house of what when. It doesn't matter. They're generally quite ineffective, and their procedures and everything get so bogged down. They can't hardly pass anything. Now, there have been some success in recent years passing some things, and in past years passing some things. But generally speaking, I don't know how you would give all the work that all these agencies under the executive do to Congress. It's laughable. It's laughable.
Yeah, I have to say that would be pretty poor use of government resources to like have Congress make every single decision.
They're not experts on everything.
Right.
And that's not to denigrate congressional leaders. They're just, no one is an expert on everything.
Nor should they be.
Nor should they be. That's why when Congress passes laws, they should and historically have had people who are subject matter experts in the area that they're passing laws in weigh in, because it matters, because people in Congress generally are not doctors. They're generally not climatologists. They're generally not people that, they're not necessarily engineers or architects when they make laws about building codes and all those kinds of things. Like, they aren't the people to do that, because they don't know those things. You have to have experts weigh in on those things, or else you're going to have a bunch of ridiculous laws that make no sense and do nothing but hurt people.
Right. To continue with this administrative state deal, they say that in recent decades, members of the House and Senate discovered that if they give away that power to the Article 2 branch of government, which I'm guessing is the executive branch, they can also deny responsibility for its actions. So today in Washington, most policy is no longer set by Congress at all, but by the administrative state.
Well, laws are passed by Congress.
Right.
Policy and procedure is determined by experts in those given areas.
Right.
It's odd to me in this whole section, and actually throughout the text, you'll see them like denigrate the idea of expertise. Expertise in an area to them it's used as almost as an insult, or as something that is a negative, like to have experts in an area.
I think that's because the experts would probably not agree with what they are wanting to implement. And
that's true.
As we'll see much later in Project 2025, because your recording of it on Twitter over there, X, whatever, has gone a bit further. And we know what they're planning on as far as like expert opinion goes as in policy making and making of laws. They see the experts as being very antithetical to their agenda. And so they don't like experts unless those experts agree with them and they can utilize them in order to push their agenda. Like that's the only time they like experts. They have a list here of I guess, ways in which this administrative state has crippled America or is negatively, maybe not crippling, but negatively affecting American life.
Okay.
Or our American society. So the first one is a combination of elected and unelected bureaucrats at the Environmental Protection Agency quietly strangles domestic energy production through difficult to understand rulemaking processes.
Okay. I'm sorry. I know we're kind of running long, but just there will be a link in the description to this. We produce more energy in the United States today than we ever have in all of history, including when Trump was president last. So it across areas, in methane gas, in crude oil, in coal, in renewable, like we are producing more energy than we ever have ever. We are a net exporter of energy now. And it's incredible that they just have no recognition. And I have faith in our ability, in the people in America and our combined ability to both protect the environment and create energy. We can do both. We can do both. Why do we have to choose?
Yeah, I don't understand why we would have to choose, but apparently they think that it is a choice. And this is one of the common talking points that I've heard from a lot of conservatives out there, not like the conservative leaders, but just your general conservative. They have this perception that under Trump, we were energy independent.
We weren't.
And we were energy dominant in the world. And now we're not.
Yeah,
for some reason.
It's crazy. We produce more energy now than we did during Trump's presidency. And that's not to say anything bad about Trump. We were doing well then too. But we're doing even better now. And that's a good thing. We should be happy about that. And we're doing it while we're also attempting to, one, protect the environment from the impacts of doing those things. And two, create additional renewable resources of energy that we can expand upon, so we don't have to worry so much in the future about having energy sources that cause damage to our planet. These are all good things. This is another thing I have a difficult time understanding.
Yeah, one of the talking points that I've heard from actually conservative leaders like Katie Britt, I interacted with one of her tweets or whatever, and she claims that Kamala Harris wanting to reduce fracking or prevent fracking or finding an alternate solution to fracking as a way of extracting resources, that is evidence that she wants to make us energy dependent instead of independent, or reduce our energy output, or somehow it's bad for America in order to like reduce the amount of fracking that we're doing.
We have the dumbest senators. We
do, especially here from Alabama. But that's going to be a common talking point, and it's just simply not true, because just because we want to reduce the amount of fracking that we're doing doesn't mean that we're not going to compensate with better ways of extracting resources or different resources. Like, it's just so ridiculous that the conservative layman out there, they just hear these talking points and they don't think to ask, oh, how is that going to accomplish what you say it's going to accomplish?
Is there a better way to do it that's more environmentally sound?
What's wrong with fracking that could be bad for the environment, that we would need an alternate way?
Because most of the time, and this again is not all the time, but most of the time they don't actually want to know. They hear the buzzwords, they repeat the buzzwords, and they don't check. They don't check. So they say these things and they don't check. They keep repeating that we are terrible in energy and Joe Biden has destroyed our energy independence and all this other kind of weird stuff that they say. And it's like, no, that's not reality. Please live in reality with us. You can still disagree with policies that the Biden administration has, but please live in reality with the same set of facts.
Mm-hmm.
It's exhausting.
Yeah. All right. Next bullet point. Bureaucrats at the Department of Homeland Security, following the lead of a feckless administration, order border and immigration enforcement agencies to help migrants criminally enter our country with impunity. I'm not sure what policy that they're talking about here under the Biden-Harris administration, but I mean, this is like, I just don't see this as happening in reality.
So I do know that there is a policy of the Biden administration that if there is someone who is in distress coming into our country illegally, that like, for example, in Texas, where they put all of the razor wire in the river, and then people were getting caught on it and literally drowning, dying. Mm-hmm. Okay, so the Biden administration was like, no, Border Patrol is, if somebody gets caught on that or whatever, they're going to help them. Okay, so this is another one of those things I just cannot wrap my mind around. Border Patrol will not just simply stand by and watch them die. They will or do things that result in their deaths. They're people, okay? Immigrants, illegal or otherwise. They're people, okay? People first. People first. Mm-hmm. You can be upset that illegal immigrants are coming to our country, but it's amazing to me that the same people who were so quote unquote pro-life, right? Let's make pro-life mean what life. If you care about life, you should care about what happens to these people. Instead, their dear leader calls these people animals. Animals.
Mm-hmm. And not even human.
Not even human. That's what he has said about immigrants. You can have whatever opinion you want to have on immigration and what's gone wrong, what policies work, what policies don't. We want a fence. We don't. Have whatever opinions you want on those policies. Illegal immigrants are human beings. So any policy that puts people first, for me, is one I'm going to support. If you consider the Border Patrol not letting someone die as legally helping them enter or illegally helping them enter our country, the problem isn't them, it's you.
Yeah. This is yet again another big talking point of a bunch of conservative laymen out there. Basically, border control and all this other stuff. And they'll say that there's way more illegal immigrants or immigrants in general just entering our country under Biden. That's because Biden's opened up our borders. Well, he hasn't opened up the borders, for one. For two, there are like more encounters going on, but it's impossible to tell whether or not that's because we're just getting better at stopping people from coming in illegally, or if there really is a surge. And so like there's just no way to tell if like Trump was just like lax on catching undocumented immigrants.
Yeah, maybe
entering.
more were getting by. Maybe as many were coming, but more were getting by, and so we didn't know about them.
Right.
And we're not saying that's what was happening.
We're saying we don't know. We
don't know. What we do know is there are more being processed now, but it's not an invasion. That's not a real thing that's happening.
Right.
It just isn't.
All right. Next on their list is the bureaucrats at the Department of Education inject racist, anti-American, ahistorical propaganda into America's classrooms. I'm guessing that's the critical race theory that they're talking about, and basically teaching real history is what it seems like, because as we saw in Florida, they actually want to teach that slavery was a good thing.
Yeah.
It was a good thing that black people were held as slaves.
I mean, it's U.S. history. U.S. history is chock full of racism. It's chock full of all kinds of things that are bad. The whole Christopher Columbus, people love to raise Christopher Columbus up on a pedestal. The guy was a freaking monster, and genocide and rape and pillaging and all kinds of things happened with Christopher Columbus. Also, he never made it to mainland America. So the idea that he discovered America is absolutely ridiculous. We should teach our kids real things. Obviously, we're not going to talk to young children about rape, but our history is full of these things. These are just facts. Me personally, I just don't see the problem with teaching our children facts. teaching them that racism existed and exists today is not, it's not bad to teach them that. This is another thing I have a hard time wrapping my brain around. Maybe it's just me, like, because I can't understand why some of these things aren't a real problem.
Mm-hmm.
Like I get racism is upsetting. I agree. We should do everything that we can to get rid of it. But we are not going to do that by pretending it doesn't exist. Or by pretending that it never existed.
Right. I mean, they essentially just want people to forget about how bad white people treated black people, you know, and how that even continues today, and how a lot of those prejudices that were caused by the subjugation of black Americans exist and permeate through our society today and influence even policy decisions. Because like that was like 1995 crime bill. Mm-hmm. It overly targeted the black community, and
people who voted for the crime bill then will say that now. It was not intended for some of the people who voted for it, who see now that was not the right thing to do. They did not see that impact then. Right.
The only thing I was going to point out is that the conservatives knew what they were doing. They slipped it in under the liberals, the Democrats at the time, slipped it in there, and the liberals didn't realize like how it would be enforced and how it would actually target the black community. And so like they were able to get a whole bunch of Democrats on board with it because they dressed it up with flowery language like we have in Project 2025 here. Yeah. And so that's what tricked the Democrats like Biden to vote for the crime bill. But the conservatives, they always knew what they were doing, because it was that, what is it called? It was like the Southern...
Poverty Law Center?
No, not Southern...
Southern Baptist Convention, the SBC?
No. Sorry, it was a certain tactic that Southern conservatives, they were using, and I can't remember what the actual term is called, but there was a term for this sort of plan that they had to subvert the Democrats in Congress.
Well, you can see what their plans are. There's a mandate for leadership for every fourth year back to 1981. So go check your mandate for leadership and mandates for leadership and see what it says.
Right.
It's probably there.
All right. Next up is the bureaucrats at the Department of Justice force school districts to undermine girls' sports and parents' rights to satisfy transgender extremists. Can you imagine how just acknowledging someone's existence is considered extremist?
Well, and two, none of these people care about girls' sports. They just don't. They care about eradicating trans people and making it impossible for them to integrate into society as their true selves, because it makes them uncomfortable, because they're bigots, right? States in this country have passed laws banning trans girls from girls' sports, spending millions of dollars and significant effort, when in most cases, when asked, they literally can't name one example in their entire state of this being a problem. And it's sick. There are articles out there about this, how they literally can't come up with one example. Or in one state, and I can't remember which state it is off the top, in one state, they passed a law banning transgender girls from sports, and there was literally one trans girl in sports in the entire state. Can you imagine how it made that one girl feel? That one child, this law targeted her specifically. And these are the people that supposedly care about our children, right? So there was this big deal made, and she's the only one in the entire state. These are not real problems. These are not real. They're making up problems that do not exist in a way that you can discriminate against kids. Like, it's exhausting. Sorry, I'm going to get off my soapbox. I know we're running long.
We are a little bit. I was going to say it's called the Southern Strategy.
Oh, okay.
And the Southern Strategy was specifically geared to target the black community and reduce their ability to like vote for Democrats and reduce their representation, basically.
Sure. I mean, that's been a common thread.
Yeah, it was
here in Alabama. They tried just this past election cycle. They tried to redraw the maps to put all three quote unquote black areas of the state together, right? Birmingham, Mobile, and Montgomery. So that basically they'd be one voting block and they'd never have a chance. Because right now, if you have them in separate, there's 7 voting districts in the state of Alabama. If you have Birmingham in one, Mobile in one, Montgomery in one, and then Huntsville, which is becoming more and more purple to, trending that way. If you have 4 areas in the state and 4 separate voting districts, Alabama could go blue. And so they redistrict to put areas together that make no sense for them to be together to prevent that from ever being a possibility.
Right.
Yeah. But systemic racism isn't real.
Yeah. Next bullet point is the woke bureaucrats at the Pentagon force troops to attend training seminars about white privilege.
Woke.
Oh my goodness.
The wokies.
I mean, as far as like the Pentagon and our armed forces, like there's several different trainings that they are mandated to take like every single year to include like sexual harassment training. Basically, just appropriate workplace behavior is generally the practice.
There are training classes. I mean, there are a lot of training classes set that are established specifically to help workers succeed in the workplace for various things. I know where I work, there is a training class that includes how to communicate generationally. So like, because boomers communicate differently than Gen X communicates differently, the millennials communicates differently than Gen Z. And so it's how to effectively communicate across, because you have to work with people from all the generations, right? So that's helpful. That's not woke. We also, at my work, and I know we also have a class called How Not to Be an Asshole at Work. That's literally a class that we have. You don't have to take it unless you're an asshole at work, though.
Yeah. And then finally, on the bulleted list here, there's bureaucrats at the State Department infuse U.S. foreign aid programs with woke extremism about intersectionality and abortion.
I feel like most of them can also not define intersectionality.
No, they would not be able to do that.
They are very opposed to anything that they consider bad, they consider woke. And most of it is related to anything to do with race, anything to do with gender or sexuality. All those things are woke. They use this buzz term to, make it's bad. Woke is bad to them, right?
Yeah, and they can't define it.
No, they can't.
At all. Because woke is just whatever they don't like.
Yep.
The mandate continues on with this at the end of the next paragraph saying, cultural institutions like public libraries and public health agencies are only as independent from public accountability as elected officials and voters permit.
They don't want libraries to be independent. I'm sorry. Aren't there like in public school libraries and public libraries across the country, aren't there like pushes to get bunches of books banned from the libraries? That's not independence. No. I'm just, again, this is another one of those instances where they say a thing, but they don't actually mean that thing.
Right. And I mean, I don't know as far as like them being independent goes, their entire funding, the entire reason why they exist is because they get public funds in order to exist.
This is an example of socialism.
Yeah.
For those who are afraid of socialism,
public
libraries.
And, I think it does go back to this whole equity thing because like public libraries are sort of like an equitable thing. Everybody has access to the public library, or at least they should. And, if you think back to the 1950s and 60s before the Civil Rights Act, even after that point, the Black community didn't have the same kind of access to public libraries as the white community.
Well, a lot of public things, same with public pools. They didn't have access to public pools in the same way, and public libraries and lots of public services and things. And it's a problem. And
so the reason why I'm bringing this up is just to reinforce how this is about specifically white Christian nationalism. They're wanting to whitewash our history. They're wanting to reclaim, some of this ground that they had, this access to like public services and everything like that. They want to reclaim like the ability to have that for the, their preferred group of people.
But it's not like they don't have access to that now.
No. But the problem is other people have access to it too, and they don't like that.
So what?
I mean, for us, it's so what? But for them, it's like, well, we can't allow this other group of people, whether that be Black people in general, liberals, whatever outgroup they wanted to define. It doesn't really matter which.
But they're not trying to take access away from those people. They just want to ban books with LGBTQ plus people in them.
Well,
I guess
yeah.
I'm just having a hard time connecting what you're saying.
Well, yeah. Well, I'm not saying that they're trying to restrict access to specific groups, but what I'm saying is that they're trying to control the public libraries in the same ways that they used to, just with different groups of people, like the LGBTQ community, and restricting the libraries from having any kind of representation in there. Like, they don't want equitable representation.
No, absolutely not. They don't want equitable representation. And their meltdowns over drag queens in library, drag queen story hour is ridiculous to me.
And if you think back to earlier in like Promise 1, or maybe it was in Promise 2 here, how they're wanting to eradicate several different terms and concepts from everything. And so that's what I'm saying is, like, in the 50s and 60s, it was the Black community. Now it's wokeness. They're wanted to disenfranchise who they consider to be woke.
Right. And if they don't like anything that gets federal funding, if there's something that they don't like there, they'll just take the funding away.
Right.
And you will see this repeated again and again throughout this mandate for leadership.
Right. All right. Next on this section, we've got from the mandate, a conservative president must move swiftly to do away with these vast abuses of presidential power and remove the career and political bureaucrats who fuel it.
That's going to become more important as we move on.
Okay.
We'll talk about the removal of career and political positions and people.
I mean, it kind of seems like they'd be fine with it as long as they keep people like they like in power, but I don't know, maybe they have a different thing going forward. But anyways, moving on with this Promise 2, they continue with ruling elites slash and tear at restrictions and accountability placed on them. They centralize power up and away from the American people to supranational treaties and organizations, to left-wing experts, to sight unseen all or nothing legislating, to the unelected career bureaucrats of the administrative state.
Yeah, so this is another one of those things where I talk about how they denigrate experts. It's not just about left-wing or right-wing. Experts are experts, right, in an area. And there's nothing wrong with having expertise in an area. That's actually a good thing. As far as unelected career bureaucrats, we're going to see as we move along, they don't like the idea of career civil servants. They think that essentially everybody should be appointed. Okay, but that's still unelected. However, they get around the idea of unelected by saying that people who are appointed by the elected person and therefore de facto elected. And it's wild. The apologetics and the things that they say, that they twist, is so bizarre. And you'll see that a lot. They want political appointees and loyalists up and down the government, completely filled with, and one of the reasons we have career civil servants is continuity, right? You can't just replace everybody in the government every 4 years, or 8, as it were. You just can't do that. Right. It's not reasonable. It's millions of people. And so it's bizarre to me.
It's bizarre to me too. So continuing on, getting here to the end of Promise 2, it continues with, the conservative promise lays out how to use many of these tools, including how to fire supposedly unfireable federal bureaucrats, how to shutter wasteful and corrupt bureaus and offices, how to muzzle woke propaganda at every level of government, how to restore the American people's constitution authority over the administrative state, and how to save untold taxpayer dollars in the process.
And this was one of the things I was talking about when they say restoring American people's constitutional authority over the administrative state. They're talking about moving everything that's under the executive that creates policy under the legislative, right? Which explain to me how that's going to work, and maybe we can talk about it. But as it were right now, how Congress works now, how the legislative branch functions, it's not possible. We'll get nothing will get done. Bad idea. Bad idea.
Yeah. And also how to save untold taxpayer dollars in the process. Like, I don't see any of their economic suggestions as being like taxpayer saving. Like, Project 2025 here itself lays out a tax code, how they want to do taxes. It's going to increase the amount of taxes that lower and middle income families would pay, while decreasing the tax burden on the richer individuals in our society, like people making over $400,000.
Sure, but I think the argument has nothing to do with individual tax code. I think the argument regarding saving untold taxpayer dollars is they're going to shutter what they consider as wasteful and corrupt bureaus and anything that has woke propaganda, right? So you think about it, if they shutter the EPA and the Department of Education and the Department of whatever, transportation, I don't know, whatever departments they want to get rid of, if you shutter those, automatically you're saving lots and lots and lots of money, right? Because they cost a lot of money to run. So that, I think that's what they're talking about. They're saving tons of taxpayer money by shuttering all these. But the work that they do doesn't just go away.
Right.
So you have to have a plan, or else you're going to have a bigger problem than how much money they cost to run.
Do I remember hearing something about them wanting to shutter the FBI too?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know how that would work. Like
I don't know how any of this would work.
All right. So here's the next part is a little scary to me. So finally, the president can restore public confidence and accountability to our most important government function of all, national defense. The American people desire a military full of highly skilled servicemen and women who can protect the homeland and our interests overseas. The next conservative president must end the left's social experiment with the military, restore war fighting as its sole mission, and set defeating the threat of the Chinese Communist Party as its highest priority. What? Hold on. Are they saying that we have to go to war with China?
Yeah, wait till we get to the national defense, the common defense section, which is the next, like we're in the foreword. So the next section is explaining the different executive offices and things. Okay, that's the next section, chapters 1-3. Then we get into the common defense, which is chapter 4. And they'll talk about the Department of Defense. It's something. Yeah. There's a lot about China.
Yeah. But I mean, like, it's just so weird to me because if I remember correctly, like Trump's whole MAGA hat thing, those are not made in America. Those are made in China.
They are.
And like, I don't understand because, like, for one thing, we don't need to go to war with China. We just simply don't.
I mean, they don't say go to war with China. Like, they don't.
Well, okay, so how I'm getting there? Well, how I'm getting there is it says that they need to end the whatever the left's social experimentation is.
Woke, blah,
right,
blah, blah.
Restore war fighting as its sole mission, and then it talks about defeating the Chinese Communist Party.
Yeah.
So if war fighting is its sole mission, and we need to focus that mission on defeating the Chinese Communist Party, what kind of inference are we supposed to draw from that? What message are they sending with that? And I feel like the message is everybody attack China. Like, yeah,
it's more complicated than that, but you're not wrong.
Okay.
I mean, it's not like drop everybody in China and have them kill all the Chinese. Like, it's not
it's not like an invasion of China.
No, not in the traditional sense of war, but they have lots of plans, and we'll get into those later in later chapters.
Okay. Well, this has ended on a frightening note.
I mean, it typically does. This whole book is something else.
No kidding. All right. Well, I think that's going to be it for Promise 1 and 2 of the 4-pronged conservative promise. We will be getting to Promises 3 and 4 next time.
Yep. And that will help us finish out the foreword.
We'll get done with the foreword finally.
It's a lot to go over.
Yeah. All right. Well, I guess that's going to be it for this edition of Deconstructing Project 2025. Please let us know how scared you are down in the comments section. We'd really love to hear about your concerns over what we've gone over today. And while you're down there, why don't you smash that like button and subscribe if you like this kind of podcast.
And don't forget to check out the description for sources that we've used and linked in there. And don't forget to stand up and use your voice.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, y'all.